Hey, what's going on, YouTubers? Thanks for tuning back in to part 2 of the motor teardown. So, bought an EG hatch. If you haven't already, you can go click on the video, part 1. I bought the hatch, got it home. Motor was locked up. I got it in the car and started tearing it down. So, after I got the head off, we figured out that the fourth piston was detached from the rod. But I haven't gotten any further because we need to pull the motor out to put the engine on the stand and so on and so forth. So hang out with us, stick around. I'm going to pull the motor from the car, get it put up onto what I have as part of engine stand, missing a wheel. So we'll get it put together, get it put up on there. All the oil, all the fluids have drained out. So all we need to do now is remove 4 bolts from, actually 3 bolts from the engine mounts, 1 bolt from the shifter linkage, and another pinch pin from the shifter linkage. Go from there. So hopefully nobody gets hurt. Let's go ahead and get started. With the magic of video editing, I went ahead and removed the motor. I didn't record any of it because it did get a little sketchy, but ultimately the motor mounts that were in the car ended up being pretty garbage. I'll show you that here in just a minute, but the car's down, sitting on the suspension. The forks are not in it, so it actually won't come up off of the floor jack here. So I've got to fix that before we can roll it out. I've got a lot of stuff to do with the EK hatch, and this one's got to move out of the garage for me to be able to do so. So overall, the car used to be white, as you can see deep down in here. Since then, it's been black. The outside's blue. It might be like a big crayon underneath. We don't really know yet, but we'll get all this cleaned up, tidied up, and let's go ahead and look at the other stuff. So we do, in fact, have a GSR transmission. It's not an LSD model. It's an open diff model. So I'm looking at potentially using this. I'll talk to you in just a minute about it, but the motor mount pretty well fell apart. The urethane or bushing part of the inside fell apart. All the other stuff was in pretty good shape. The axles were pretty well unhurt. One of the actual CV ends kept coming loose. The bushing on the block post mount ended up being pretty destroyed. I actually twisted almost completely sideways. All the other stuff, the distributor looks pretty well new. The harness needs a lot of love. The harness is going to end up having to be really modified. I think it's a DX harness and they wired in VTEC. A lot of this stuff over here is not really up to my par. Little heat shrink, solder it back, put some plugs on it, we'll be good to go. Guys, as you can see here, it didn't really go as planned. 2 days into this is the part 2 part of it, but the motor's not on the stand yet. The engine stand that I bought is actually missing the wheel that goes up here, so I've got to replace it. Harbor Freight's getting a truck today, so hopefully I'll get that wheel tonight and we can get this guy put up on the engine stand before this video is over. And by doing so, we'll pull the oil pan, pull the windage tray, and start pulling the crank out of it. Oil pump, water pump, all that good stuff. So as I mentioned about the GSR transmission, the plan is I'm going to use a lot of these parts on the EK. Streetcar Takeover is roughly 2 weeks away. I've got a few different other little milestones planned for the EK hatch between now and then, but the EG hatch shell is going to go on the back burner. We're going to use the GSR transmission against the LS non-VTEC that's in the EK hatch and see if we can get a little better improvement there. So while the transmission is soaking with oven cleaner, I've done that in a previous video. You can go over there. I'll put the link to the video in the description below. But while it's sitting there, before I rinse it back off, we're going to run over here to Harbor Freight before they close up for the evening. And that way we can get our wheel, put it on, and then put the block on the engine stand and tear in and show you guys actually what the culprit is in the failure of the block.
I got the engine block set up here on the engine stand. I never ended up getting the wheel, so we made this work. What you can see here is I just pulled the front bolt for the coolant jacket to go ahead and let the coolant drain. So this is getting all the water out of the block that I couldn't get out whenever we drain the radiator. All right, folks, as you can see, the oil pan's off here. Get you guys angled back around before we start trying to dive in. All right, so what I want to show you first here, there's obviously metal in the oil pan, right? Yep, we expected that. The next thing is we got to get the oil pump pickup tube off, and then we've got to pull this windage tray.
Someone smells getting burnt.
Got little pieces of metal popping out on the floor. All that in there. You guys really can't see much from your angle, so I'm going to move you around here. So what we're trying to get an angle on, my hands are awful greasy. I'm trying to get all over the camera here. So let me get a flashlight real quick. Okay, can you guys see in here? Zoom in. Ooh, a little too much, I think. Back you back down a little bit. How's that look? All right, so there's a piece of the rod chillaxing down here. You can see that. So the rod broke. The bottom of the rod broke. I'm gonna put the crank bolt back in it and turn it over so we can get this back around. So the crank looks pretty tore up. Let's see if we can get this piston out. So hang out, stay tuned, and I'm gonna pull the crank out so we can get all of these rods out and check them out. So I've got quite a mess here on my hands. All of the parts from the lower tear down here. A lot of carnage. I set up this Tupperware container. It's like a storage container, so that way I could catch anything, oil, any of the coolant that was still left in the block. And whenever I was knocking the pistons and rods out the top of it, they ended up splashing. So I have a little bit of a mess to clean up, but overall it was fun. Learned a lot. Like I said, I've never really done this myself before. I've got a bit of a predicament here with this rod bearing. I'll post a better clip with some better lighting in here. But overall, pretty decent experience here, and look forward to potentially assembling my own motor here in the near future. So all in all, I've learned along this little journey that I've taken ripping this block apart, but the failure looks to be like a burnt rod bearing or something around that rod, journal of the crank. I'm gonna get Will to inspect a lot of this, some of these guys, and get their opinion, because I don't really know what I'm looking at. But I don't think the block is necessarily usable. You guys make your own judgment based off that last video clip. Let me know in the comments. But if anything's usable, so far it's the head. I dropped the transmission off with Infamous Motorsports earlier. We're doing a new clutch for the EK, potentially a differential, and some suspension stuff before streetcar takeovers. So probably no time to really do anything with the VTEC head and build a block, but that'll be in the future. So I think for the time being, we're going to stick a B20 or something in the hatch for my wife to be able to drive it around, kind of putt-putt car, so to speak. But that'll be in a future video again. So guys, bear with me. Not really into a lot of this tear down stuff, but hope the video was, you know, enjoyable to the point you could follow along and understand. So subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave me a comment, let me know what you think of that the block and the crank journals. But we'll catch you in the next video, and as always, thank you for watching.